Smash Brothers and cooking. You hear those two things together and it usually means somebody's going absolutely mad with a certain character or combo. But that's not what we're talking about today. You've seen all those videos about which Smash fighters can canonically do this and do that, and I'm throwing my hat into the ring to find out which Smash Brothers characters can canonically cook. You know, as in prepare food or a meal. My criteria for cooking determination is simple. I need to either see the character cooking or find a piece of dialogue that confirms that they cook or have cooked in the past. We are looking at the non-Smash games only for this, no spin-off shows, movies, OVAs, etc. I'll be grading each fighter's cooking ability on 3 levels. Yes, if we know they can cook, no, if there is no evidence that they can cook, and probably if there's no evidence but we can reasonably assume that they cook. Simple as that, let's get to it. Up first is Mario, and my initial thought was Taste-Tea and Zest-Tea from the Paper Mario series, but Mario doesn't do any of the cooking with them. However, in Super Mario Party, he can fry up a steak in the Sizzling Steaks minigame, so he cooks. We'll be using this minigame as an example for a lot of fighters, such as with Donkey Kong, who can also sizzle a steak, so he cooks. Adult Link is based on Breath of the Wild Link, and one of the core gameplay mechanics is cooking and eating food to restore health and stamina, so he definitely cooks. Samus is a tricky one because we don't see a lot of her life outside of bounty hunting and exploring various planets. There are some comics that depict her house and her kitchen, but obviously those aren't canon for the purposes of this video. But given that she is an independent bounty hunter and likely lives on her own between missions, it's fair to assume that she has to cook at least some of her meals, so she probably cooks. I won't extend the same courtesy to Dark Samus though, as a being of pure Phazon energy, I doubt she even needs to eat food, let alone cook it, so she does not cook. Yoshi can sizzle a steak. He cooks. Kirby is not only a hungry little guy, but one of his copy abilities is, well, cook, where he takes all the enemies on screen and cooks them in a big pot. So iconic that it became his final Smash and Brawl, and although he's since lost that ability in Smash, he still cooks. My knowledge of the Star Fox series is not super high, but after doing some research, I couldn't find any evidence that Fox McCloud does any cooking. Maybe he does on the Great Fox, but I don't know, that sounds like a Peppy or Rob64 task instead. So unless I'm missing something, he cannot cook. There are a few ways to cook something in the Pokemon universe, but most of them involve the Pokemon trainer doing the work, or else it's another Pokemon like the Spinda Cafe. But if we look at Pokemon Cafe Mix, well, this little restaurant is staffed with Pokemon, and Pikachu can be one of them, so they cook. This is another game we'll be using as a reference point multiple times, so stay tuned. Luigi can sizzle a steak. He cooks. Ness and his friends can order tons of food in Earthbound, but nothing that you cook. Putting seasonings on your food isn't enough, and while you could argue the cup of life noodles would be boiled, I don't think that's enough evidence, so Ness can't cook. Captain Falcon is another character whose personal life is kind of a mystery, so whether he cooks or not is up for debate. F-Zero GP Legend shows him as the owner of the Falcon House Cafe, although that's not canon here. Since he's also a bounty hunter, I'd have to imagine he has spent at least some of his time cooking meals on a job, so he probably cooks. Jigglypuff can join your staff in Pokemon Cafe Mix. They cook. Peach can sizzle a steak. She cooks. Daisy can sizzle a steak. She cooks. Bowser can sizzle a steak. He cooks. The Ice Climbers only appeared in one game, and information from that title is severely limited, but considering that they are mountaineers and they collect vegetables, I have to imagine they're cooking something as they climb, so they probably cook. Now Sheik, and by extension the Ocarina of Time version of Zelda, is mostly off-screen, and when she does show up, she certainly isn't cooking anything. And while I could maybe buy that Zelda could whip something up in her Sheik persona, we are talking about a princess here, so likely she has her meals prepared. With that lack of evidence, I have to conclude that Sheik can't cook. But what about the Link to the Past version of Zelda? Well, the same princess parameters apply, and the closest thing I could find for this list is the smoothie shop in Echoes of Wisdom. But not only is this probably not the same Zelda from Link to the Past, it's a bit far in the future for that, but also she isn't even making the smoothies. Even if she was, saying that making a smoothie is cooking would be a huge stretch that I wouldn't want to justify. So she can't cook. Dr. Mario is Mario, and as we know, Mario can sizzle a steak. He cooks. Pichu can't join the staff in Pokemon Cafe Mix, and yes, I consider Pokemon evolutions as separate characters for our purposes today. It's not that important, so deal with it. Anyway, they can't cook. Just as with Fox, I don't think Falco does any cooking, and something tells me he probably wouldn't want to even if he could, so he can't cook. I am admittedly not well versed in the Fire Emblem series, but I tried my best, and in my research, I don't think Marth can cook across his multiple appearances. I couldn't find any support conversations that proved things one way or the other, and although he appears in games where cooking is a mechanic, I don't think he can take part. Plus, he's royalty just like Zelda, so his meals are surely prepared by someone else, so he can't cook. However, I think Lucina cooks according to a support conversation she can have with Tiki. The wording is a little vague, but I think the implication is that Lucina at least chipped in at some point to help make a meal. So I'm calling it Lucina can cook. Cooking isn't a mechanic in neither Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask, and hell, the only things we see Youngling consume is potions and milk, so I doubt we're dealing with a culinary genius here. He can't cook. Speaking of Ocarina of Time, this is the version of Ganondorf in Ultimate, and at least in this game, the only thing he's cooking up is a sinister plot. Ganondorf can't cook. Mewtwo can't join the staff in Pokemon Cafe Mix. They can't cook. Just as with Marth, I don't think there's any dialogue that supports Roy doing any cooking. While he's also part of a royal lineage, he is the leader of an army, so maybe he helps cook for his soldiers, although I don't have enough knowledge to confirm that myself, so for now, he doesn't cook. For more Fire Emblem shenanigans, we have Chrom, and this one is complicated and I couldn't completely verify this, so bear with me. So according to a line of dialogue that Kagel might say in Fire Emblem Awakening, her father was helping out with the cooking at some point, and depending on your actions, Chrom can be her father. I don't know what prompts her to say this, and I couldn't find a screenshot or video that showed it off, but assuming that this wiki text dump is accurate, I guess that means Chrom can cook. Thankfully, Mr. Game & Watch is far easier to determine. In the game Chef, he is quite literally cooking, so Mr. Game & Watch can cook. Meta Knight strikes me as a character who might be good at cooking if he gave it a try, but I don't think he actually does. He can't use the copy abilities, Kirby hogs that, so I don't think Meta Knight can cook. Pit's more about eating food than cooking it, and we know his culinary knowledge is, at best, ordering a pizza, so I doubt he can cook. And Dark Pit is a clone, so all the cooking experience would transfer over. You know, all none of it. So he can't cook. Zero Suit Samus is Samus, and we already established that Samus probably cooks. And she still probably cooks. Wario can sizzle a steak. He cooks. Solid Snake doesn't do any cooking in the games themselves. The closest we get is eating food in MGS3, but A, that's Big Boss, not Solid Snake, and B, you don't cook any of these critters, just kinda eat them. But we know that between Metal Gear 2 and Metal Gear Solid, Snake spent a lot of time alone in the wilderness, and surely he would have cooked something during that period, so he probably cooks. I once again couldn't find any dialogue that supports Ike cooking, although he does evidently have a big appetite and loves meat, which, I think we could parse that just by looking at him. And unlike the other Fire Emblem characters we've talked about so far, Ike isn't royalty, he leads a band of mercenaries, and thus it's more likely he and the rest of his party would chip in with the cooking, so Ike probably cooks. As the Pokemon trainer, you can make a couple of different foods for you and your Pocket Monster pals. Pokeblocks in Gen 3, Poffins in Gen 4, Curry in Gen 8, and sandwiches in Gen 9, so Pokemon Trainer cooks. Squirtle can join the staff in Pokemon Cafe Mix. They cook. Ivysaur can't join the staff in Pokemon Cafe Mix. They can't cook. Charizard can't join the staff in Pokemon Cafe Mix. They can't cook. And don't come at me with a yeah, but he breathes fire, he can cook his enemies. That's not making a meal, that's committing a crime. Diddy Kong can sizzle a steak. He cooks. Here's an unconventional one. In Mother 3, a chicken will hand you a free fresh egg, which you can either eat or let hatch into a chicken. But if you enter a hot spring while an egg is in your inventory, it will cook and turn into a hot spring egg. A little avant-garde, but I can't deny that boiling an egg is cooking, so Lucas cooks. Sonic is known for his love of chili dogs, but does he ever cook one in the games? Well, that I'm not sure about, but in Sonic Frontiers, thanks to the Monster Hunter crossover, he can straight up spit roast some meat. That's strange, but Sonic definitely cooks. King Dedede is another voracious eater, and given his self-proclaimed king status, he likely has somebody else make all of his meals. And think about this, in the first game, his whole scheme is stealing the food in Dreamland, and why would he need to do that if he can already cook? Just to be an ass? Actually, that kinda makes sense. King Dedede can't cook. Olimar doesn't cook during the events of Pikmin to my knowledge, at least as part of the gameplay. I have to imagine he cooks something at some point in order to stay alive on PNF 404, or maybe he just lives on juice? I don't know about that, but Olimar probably cooks. Lucario can join the staff in Pokemon Cafe Mix. They cook. Rob can only do 3 things: move his arms, pick stuff up, and... wait, that's only 2 things, and neither of them are cooking. Okay, I guess he can also save a dying console for the North American market, but can he dice an onion? I don't think so he can't cook. Back to the Zelda series to look at Toon Link, and while the kid loves his grandma's elixir soup, I couldn't find any evidence that he ever cooks the recipe, and there isn't any other cooking to do across his games, so likely he can't cook. There's still nothing that proves that any of the Star Fox characters do any cooking, and that's true of Wolf as well. I'm beginning to suspect that cooking is just not a thing in the Star Fox universe, and all of their dietary needs are provided by a little patch on the nape of the neck. You might think that's crazy, but trust me, it's not the dumbest Star Fox theory out there. Anyway, Wolf can't cook. Not being an Animal Crossing fan, I was surprised to learn that cooking wasn't a thing in these games until New Horizons, and even then, only after an update. You'd think that'd be a shoo-in from the start, but I guess not. Anyway, that means Villager cooks. Mega Man was built as a lab assistant and later a super fighting robot, and wasn't built for any other domestic tasks. That seems to be Roll's job, because get it, girl robot gotta do the cooking, Anyway, Mega Man can't cook. While we don't see Wii Fit Trainer cooking, as that's not a part of any Wii Fit game, since they're a personal trainer and cooking your own healthy meals is a great way to get in shape, this is kind of a no-brainer. Wii Fit Trainer probably cooks. Rosalina can sizzle a steak. She cooks. Little Mac also has to be on a strict diet to stay in shape, but since he's under the boxing tutelage and training of Doc Lewis, I'm not sure if he'd cook anything himself. Maybe at home, but we know precious little about his home life, so I can't make a firm conclusion one way or the other. Please inform me if I'm wrong, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, he probably cooks. Greninja can't join the staff in Pokemon Cafe Mix. They can't cook. The Mii characters can become chefs in Street Pass Mii Plaza's Feed Me game, making various treats and dishes, and you can give them a frying pan to make some food in Tomodachi Life, so the Miis definitely cook. Palutena is another tricky one because I couldn't find any in-game evidence of her cooking, and no, Palutena's revolting dinner doesn't count. But given her status as the mom of the group, I can imagine that she does the cooking around here. And hey, remember what I just joked about girls doing the cooking? Well, it turns out that I'm a part of the problem by making this video, and you should crucify me. But not before you like and subscribe. Anyway, Palutena probably cooks. In Pac-Man Party, you can play a minigame called Pizza Party where you bake and serve a pizza, and since Pac-Man is obviously a playable character here, that means he cooks. Robin is yet another gender stereotype enforcing case because I only have evidence that Robin cooks if you choose the female character. According to a support conversation with Severa that only happens with girl Robin, she does indeed cook. That is enough to give Robin the thumbs up though. Shulk doesn't cook in the first Xenoblade game, he is a military man after all, and Fiora prepares many of his other meals because haha women, but in Xenoblade Chronicle 3's Future Redeemed DLC, he steps up to the pod and actually cooks something. Or looks at a recipe book forever, but this counts, Shulk can cook. Bowser Jr. can sizzle a steak. He cooks. Given that the Duck Hunt dog is just a hunting dog and the duck is just a wild animal, I feel safe saying neither of them have any culinary abilities, so they can't cook. Ryu is a wanderer who journeys across the world, and in that time, he has to have picked up some cooking skills. And in Street Fighter VI's World Tour mode, some dialogue confirms that he loves cooking soba, so Ryu can cook. I had a much harder time wrapping my head around Ken. It's well known via extraneous material like game manuals and promotional websites that Ken not only loves pasta, but is skilled at cooking it too. But as far as in-game evidence is concerned, I couldn't find anything. Granted, I'm not a Street Fighter expert, but my gut feeling is that if he said it at some point in the games, I would have been able to find it by now. Ken is actually the reason I added the probably can cook category in the first place, just to tackle edge cases like this. So yes, Ken can probably cook. Cloud was a member of Soldier, cough cough, and as such, many of his meals would likely be prepared by somebody else. And in FF7 Rebirth, there's the quest The Spice of Life, where you gather ingredients for Cisne. However, while Aerith does provide hands-on help with the actual cooking, Cloud just stands there being useless. Because women do the cooking, blah blah blah, I'm sick of this joke. With all that considered, I don't think Cloud can cook. In Fire Emblem Fates, you can visit the mess hall to make a meal with most of the characters, but oddly enough, Corrin isn't one of them. They're just there to watch others bumble about in the kitchen. So I'm gonna go with Corrin not being able to cook, although I want to stress, I'm probably missing something. Bayonetta loves licking lollipops, and in the games, you can concoct them yourself. And while I doubt this is actually how she does it in-universe, you do have to melt syrup and sugar to make a lollipop, so I'll say that Bayonetta cooks. There are a ton of food options in Inkopolis, but none of them involve you cooking yourself, so Inkling can't cook. I doubt Ridley is interested in cooking his prey. He strikes me as the I'll just eat people raw kind of guy. Don't read into that. Anyway, Ridley can't cook. While I don't think we have any actual evidence of Simon cooking something, I imagine he can at least cook meat over a fire or something given his adventurer status. I wouldn't exactly trust him to cook a meal since he's content eating meat that he found on a wall, but I bet he probably cooks. Same with Richter, even if he is engaged by the time Rondo of Blood begins, I'll bet he cooked something up in the past. So Richter can probably cook. King K. Rool steals a lot of bananas from the Kongs, but does he like cooking them? I don't know. And he may call himself a master chef in DKC3, but that doesn't mean anything. Plus, just like DDD, he's a king, and therefore likely delegates the cooking to a subordinate. So King K. Rool doesn't cook. I know that Isabelle hands out seasonal recipes and says she wanted to try them out, but none of them are food, they're crafting recipes, not meal recipes. And while she's crazy for that vacation juice, I couldn't determine if she does any cooking, though like most of the villagers, she likely does when she's alone at home, so Isabelle probably cooks. Incineroar can't join the staff in Pokemon Cafe Mix. They can't cook. Throughout their numerous appearances in the Mario series, I don't think a Piranha Plant has ever been seen cooking. I've actually seen more pictures showing Piranha Plant as a food instead of a food preparer. Anyway, Piranha Plant can't cook. After bonding enough with Sojiro in Persona 5, Joker can cook some curry in Café LeBlanc. I guess you could say he's cooking cool Joker. So yeah, he can cook. Hero encompasses multiple characters, and you can cook food in Dragon Quest 8, 9, and 10, which is enough for me to say that Hero can cook, at least in some of his forms. Banjo and Kazooie might be the only characters who cook before you even start the game, because on the file select screen in Banjo-Kazooie, they're cooking up a tasty meal, yum yum. They can cook. According to supplementary material in the Fatal Fury series, Terry mostly lives on fast food and club sandwiches that somebody else has made. No evidence that he does any cooking himself, so Terry can't cook. In Fire Emblem Three Houses, the cooking together system lets Byleth and a companion make a dish, as the name implies. And even though Byleth does just kinda stand there doing nothing, that's enough to count. Byleth can cook. Min Min is participating in the ARMS fighting tournament so she can promote her family's restaurant where she works, and thus, she has to make some killer ramen. She can cook. Cooking is one of the primary gameplay mechanics of Minecraft, so to the surprise of nobody, Steve and Alex can cook. Sephiroth is another member of Soldier and one of the highest on the totem pole, at least until he roasted the population of Nibelheim. And no, that doesn't count as cooking, you freaks. Anyway, he's likely more concerned about impressing his mom than cooking up meals, so I'm ruling that Sephiroth can't cook. Pyra's cooking is a gameplay mechanic in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Do the math, Pyra can cook. Mithra's cooking is a gameplay mechanic in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Torn of the Golden Country. Do the math, Mithra can cook. Although evidently she shouldn't. Kazuya's employment status changes across the Tekken series, but in a lot of cases, he's the leader of a huge corporation or otherwise wealthy enough to have someone else make his meals. But stay tuned for my follow-up video where I cover which Smash Fighters owns the most shoes, because he's gonna destroy that one. Kazuya can't cook. Finally, we come to Sora, and hey, this might be a good spot to find some ingredients. We can also find Remy the Rat and cook some tasty meals with him, so Sora can cook. Alright, we've covered everybody, so let's turn off the burners and let our stew cool off. I counted 42 fighters who can cook, 12 fighters who probably can, and 36 who can't. As I said, feel free to correct any mistakes I made, and while you're down in the comments yelling at me, let me know which Smash character you think would make the best dish. If you want to see me answer more questions about these fighters that nobody wanted to know, why not leave this video a like and subscribe to see more? And did you know, I'm on Blue Sky now, so go follow me there if you want. I'm GrayJ, and I'll see you some other time with more silly things.